Hello and welcome to another special episode of Shattered Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast for the Irish Daily Mirror and Irish Daily Star. We're both on location today. I'm Michael O'Toole and I'm joined by Paul Healy.
Hello, Michael. I'm joining you from inside the lobby of a hotel, so I have to be the things you do for journalism. I'm being slightly discreet, so to speak, but doing my best.
And just so listeners can know, I'm in Carlow. Today's Tuesday, and overnight there was a fatal assault in Carlow, so I've been dispatched to that, but we're not going to talk about that. We might talk about that later on the week in our Week in Crime normal podcast, but this is a special podcast. It's a follow-up to yesterday's pod in relation to Thomas Bomber Kavanagh and Liam Byrne. You're there. Tell us what happened, Paul.
Yeah, well, for anyone that's followed the coverage as of yesterday, we had the sentencing hearing for Liam Byrne and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh in relation to this conspiracy to import firearms that were discovered in Newry in County Down all the way back in 2021. And basically the plot was an attempt to try and get Bomber Kavanagh, a notorious Kinahan cartel mobster, a reduction in his sentence. He was ultimately sentenced to 21 years in prison for importing a conspiracy to import drugs, 36 million euro worth of drugs. So we heard all of the details yesterday in the sentencing, and today the men were sentenced.
And, well, we'll talk about our reactions to this, but just fill us in on what they got.
Yeah, so I suppose lucky for some and not lucky for others. In the case of Liam Byrne, I think he has come out of this quite lucky considering how involved he was in this conspiracy. Liam Byrne has been jailed to 5 years in prison, a total of 5 years in prison. But in the UK, and as was pointed out by the judge, he is entitled to half of that sentence off. So it's like getting a sentence and then a suspended portion of it. So he received a 5-year sentence, so he'll only serve 2.5 years in prison. But it was also pointed out that he is being credited with 192 days for time that he served in Spain. And you can be assured that he will also be credited for the time that he's already served here in the UK. So he served about 16 months in prison already. So if you do the maths about that, he's got about 14 months left in his prison sentence before he can be expected to be released from prison.
Yeah, there was some confusion about that last night because when we were talking about it, 192 days, but we knew that he had been in custody in Spain since June. So that's that cleared up. So it's the time he served in Spain on top of the time that he has served on remand in, I think it's Belmarsh prison.
In Belmarsh prison, yeah. Now, in fairness, Belmarsh prison is no picnic. It's 23 hours a day in a high security, Category A prison in the heart of London. It is a serious prison. So he has, had a very difficult time in there. That was even heard in the court yesterday. Now, as for Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, as I mentioned, he's already serving a 21-year sentence for the drugs, and he also served a 3-year sentence for a stun gun. People might remember the pink stun gun that was found in the kitchen of his home. That was found when the NCA searched the home all the way back in 2019, starting off all of this investigation. So he has had 24 years in prison, and Judge Philip Katz said he was taking that into consideration. He was persuaded by the argument by the defence that Bomber Kavanagh was already serving a very lengthy sentence, but he said even with reduction, he had to give Thomas Kavanagh a consecutive sentence. So he gave him 6 years consecutive to the 24 years that he's already serving. So he effectively has a total sentence of 30 years in prison. But, he's served 5 already, and the stun gun sentence is done. So you can expect to see him walk in about 10 years' time. He's 57 years of age, so you can see Thomas Kavanagh being released from prison when he's in his late 60s, 67.
Okay, just one question in relation to Liam Byrne. We spoke yesterday that there were 2 convictions, two offences. One was the firearms itself, and the other was the ammunition. And we were wondering, would they be put together or consecutive? So the judge obviously made them concurrent.
Concurrent in the case of Liam Byrne and in Sean Kent's case as well. So Sean Kent has been jailed for 6 years for his role, the same role that Liam Byrne had in the plot, which is conspiracy to import these firearms. There were 11 very serious firearms found in that cache up in Newry. And as we went through in detail, I won't go through it again here on this pod. You can listen to our previous podcast from yesterday, they were trying to secure weapons from wherever they could, including RPGs and C4s. Very, very serious stuff. And Judge Katz did say today, we had to take into consideration the fact that they were obviously able to source firearms from serious organized criminals, and that even though he was persuaded by the argument that they weren't ultimately for use and that they were taken off the streets, that these men couldn't be just rewarded for their criminality. So he wasn't doing that. But he set the sentences at the upper end of the scale as a category A1, but nonetheless, I mean, it kind of has come out the way we predicted yesterday, that we did say that Liam Byrne would probably get between 5 and 7 years. He got 5 years. He's going to serve 2.5. He's already served 14 months of that. So he's a very lucky man in one sense. Now, because of all the other offences that Thomas Kavanagh has already been serving time for, he's got a serious stretch in there. He's got 10 more years in there. So he's not a happy man, I would say. But as for Sean Kent, as it transpired with him, he's already served 3 years. So he has served probably already his sentence. It wasn't said as such, but it was worked out that he had served effectively 3 years already.
And was there any reaction from Mr. Kavanagh or Mr. Byrne at the sentencing?
Yeah, so the difference between today and yesterday was that they weren't present physically in court. They had appeared via video link from Belmarsh Prison. So I don't think the word got through to them. I mean, I think they were finding it difficult to hear the proceedings. And even as it was spelled out for them, you could tell by Liam Byrne's body language that he didn't know what was going on. He just kept throwing his hands up going, what's going on? And he was getting increasingly frustrated. He just didn't seem to realize that he had been sentenced. Then I think the moment the penny dropped, because he effectively kind of started looking a bit more jubilant, kind of slapped his legs and went kind of like, yes, like almost like it had dawned on him that he had got really all time left to serve. Bomber Kavanagh, on the other hand, appeared quite pissed off. I don't know what kind of conversation he was having with the prison officer in the room, but he was very, he seemed quite aggravated and wanted to get out of the room. So he didn't seem very happy at all. Sean Kent was sitting back quite relaxed. So I think it had dawned on him, he's getting out. He probably realized that yesterday, that his time in prison is effectively over. So some people will be disappointed and some people will be happy with the sentence. You have to appreciate they've already served time in prison, but Liam Byrne has an opportunity now to go on and live that honest life that he claims he wants to live. He will be effectively released within just over a year and just under a year and a half's time. While just before we came on here, so you forgive me, I haven't read it in great detail, but we got a fantastic press release in from the NCA, the National Crime Agency, who prosecuted this case from start to finish. And they released 3, I don't know, it's probably not going to come up on the camera, fantastic new mugshots of all 3 men. In particular, that image of Bomber Kavanagh in the Boss blue, I think he was actually wearing that yesterday. So it seems to be a relatively new photograph. That's what he looks like now. He's much more gaunt looking than he was previously. So you can see the toll that prison has had on them.
Now, because the trio were not in court today, what was the level of security like? You were saying yesterday it was really, really heavy.
Oh, it was far different, though. There was no armed presence that I could see today. And it was pointed out in the court case yesterday, which I thought was a staggering fact, that it costs the state here, so the taxpayer costs £30,000 to bring these men to court every day. So I don't know whether they were trying to just... I wonder, did they have any consideration for the taxpayers? That why they decided not to come to court? Because it was up to them. The judge did say to them that they could come to court today. They decided not to do so. So they stayed in Belmarsh Prison.
And what was the atmosphere like? Give us a flavour of what it was like. People, people have to realise this is the barrister's day job, so it's run of the mill for them.
Yeah, it's run of the mill. I mean, it was quite a quiet affair today. It wasn't the same. There wasn't really any kind of public gallery this time. There were family members in court yesterday, so it was a different atmosphere altogether, really quite formal and straightforward. And it was over relatively quickly. I'm talking to you now at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was over, just about an hour ago. I want to read out, if you don't mind, Mick, just some of a lot of the detail in this NCA press release, I think, is what we covered in the court case yesterday. But there's just a few little tidbits that are interesting. There's an example of one of the encrypted messages that they hacked into in this Encro chat. And it says a message from Kent to Liam Byrne saying that Kavanagh had asked him to pass on a message to keep on locating them things, i.e. the firearms for his mate. He said, try and get as many of them as you can. Only chance he's got of getting a good result out of this case, mate. So we sort of alluded to that yesterday. This was all a desperate, frustrated attempt by Bomber Kavanagh in prison to get these firearms to try and get himself a lesser sentence. And the judge noted that today. The judge even said that despite the fact that he was in prison, Thomas Kavanagh was still pulling the strings and running this conspiracy from behind bars. And he had to take that into consideration as an aggravating factor.
So with it over and the benefit of hindsight, I think it's safe to say that if the French and Dutch police, if they had not cracked Encrochat, Kavanagh would have got a softer sentence for the drugs. It would have worked.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Absolutely. I mean, and it was even said in court by the prosecution that more than likely that the success would, the plot would have been successful had those encrypted chats not been uncovered, you know. I also want to read out something by NCA Branch Commander Ty Surgeon, because this gives you some insight into the investigation. At the instruction of their leader, Thomas Kavanagh. So again, as we talked about yesterday, Bomber Kavanagh has come out of this as very much being the leader of this plot, even commanding Liam Byrne. Sean Kent and Liam Byrne orchestrated a cynical and dangerous plot to plant a cache of weapons so Kavanagh could direct the NCA to them and reduce his time in prison. These weapons were viable and deadly weapons, and in the hands of a criminal gang were loaded and ready for use in criminality. What this group didn't know is that their encrypted messages had been unveiled for law enforcement to see, showing every detail of their plan. And they also released photographs, which we've had photographs of some of these weapons before, but there's now a photograph of a POF PK1 submachine gun that they seized and a load of ammunition as well. It just shows you the types of weapons, the very dangerous types of weapons that were seized.
And the Encrochat hack, shall we say, has been hugely successful for the international authorities. As we keep on saying, the British police have this Operation Venetic, where it's easily dozens of people have been jailed. So it's been a huge success. But I just wonder, that ploy by Kavanagh, there's nothing original in the world. I wonder, have lots of criminals been doing this before, but we've only got to hear about it now?
Well, yeah, there apparently was a plot in the UK, I think back in the 90s, of a similar sort of thing. And it begs the question as to whether did they read about that and copy off it, or, I mean, is this kind of a well-known thing in gangland that, you can mess with the cops and, pretend to play ball. But I still think, I mean, you always hear about that code of omerta and the fact that criminals are not really supposed to speak to the police. And I wonder, in some sense, has Liam Byrne, has Bomber Kavanagh, has their reputation been damaged by this?
So in gangland, will the reputation be sullied? As I don't know about rats, because it was a plot, but they obviously were in communication with the police, and maybe that will damage them.
Well, even if it was an attempt to dupe the police and it was lying to the police, it was still talking to the police. And I don't think there are certainly criminals out there who will never trust another criminal who openly speaks to the police, even if, it was an attempt to dupe them. I think that will be seen not in the best light. And also, I mean, Kavanagh is now in a prison with lots of very dangerous criminals. So you have to wonder what his existence is like there.
So that's basically it. But just a couple of quick questions. It's not the end of the case in general, because I know we can't name them, but there are two other people before the courts.
There are two other people before the courts. They were mentioned in some of the facts that were outlined yesterday. Both of them cannot be named currently, but one of them is an Irish person who is currently serving a sentence for another crime. And so there will be an effort, I think, to bring him before the courts in the UK. And the other individual, it cannot be identified, but we expect that matter to be dealt with in early November. So we'll be able to talk about that then. But this effectively concludes an investigation that began all the way back in 2019. And it's mad when you think about it. I can remember going over for Bomber Kavanagh's very first court appearance. So people might remember that the Gardaí basically got together with the National Crime Agency. This was the start of their effort to work with international police to try and bring down the Kinahan cartel. And they went to that Tamworth mansion outside Birmingham, and they raided it. And this was all part of the operation to try and investigate whether Bomber Kavanagh was involved in importing 36 million worth of drugs, as I said. And during that, they found this pink stun gun, which Bomber Kavanagh said belonged to his son, but he took the rap for it effectively because it's his possession. And it was a stun gun disguised in a torch. He got a 3-year sentence for that. And while he was imprisoned in relation to that, they then further charged him with the drugs. He got the 21-year sentence. And then the ball has been rolling ever since then in this investigation, which ultimately led to Liam Byrne getting arrested. He fled. He fled. They caught up with him. They extradited him. And here we are, all these years later, effectively.
The guards have referred to the Kinahan cartel as having been dismantled. Would you think that's a fair assessment? Not just in relation to this, but we know that, for example, Sean McGovern is in custody in Dubai. The Irish government has recently signed an extradition treaty with Dubai. So I don't think the Kinahans are finished, but they have been really damaged in the last couple of years.
They have, but I wonder, will some people be a little disappointed that Liam Byrne, anyway, will be a free man in just over a year's time. In the interim, I suppose, he has a very difficult existence. As I said, 23 hours a day in Belmarsh prison is no picnic. It's not going to be an easy time for Liam Byrne, and I'm sure that he has had a difficult time over the past couple of years. And his knuckles have been wrapped. He has had his cards marked. I do wonder, will he return to a life of criminality when he gets out? But certainly all of his associations are gone. I mean, is he going to continue to work for Daniel Kinahan now at this stage? I do wonder whether these guys are a bit pissed off that, they have been caught, but if the cartel leaders remain at large, something that was pointed out by the Garda Commissioner is that, there is a 15 million reward there, and he has effectively put out, unusually to members of the Kinahan cartel, that maybe now's the time to tout. But I wonder if the likes of Liam Byrne and Bomber Kavanagh, more so Liam Byrne, are they pissed off that they've had to, take the brunt of this while their leaders, have got off? Okay, apart from Bomber, Daniel Kinahan's still over in Dubai.
That's a very interesting
point. I think the cartel as such, is obviously dismantled, yes, to answer your question. But, there is still an opportunity, at least for some people like Liam Byrne, to get out and to continue a life of crime, or hopefully take the other route.
So I think it's safe to say that no matter what happens, the Kinahans will probably still have the bulk of their assets and the bulk of their money, even if they are dealed at. Because I think that I read somewhere that it's mostly in cryptocurrency, and that's really, really hard for authorities to get to. But even if they lose all their money and if they lose everything, there will be other people who realize there is so much money to be made from criminality that they will try and fill their boots. But I just think that the cartel, principally because of Christie, I would say, was a phenomenon and it had international roots. But we know, for example, that the family in West Dublin is already the main drugs supplier in Ireland. So, nature abhors a vacuum, and gangland criminality definitely does.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Yeah, I mean, there's just going to be another criminal gang that has already taken the limelight, and Gardaí have already focused their attention on that. You mentioned briefly yesterday, though, and it is an important development, that Helen McAtee went to Abu Dhabi and has signed this extradition treaty. So, they haven't taken their focus off Daniel Kinahan, and they're obviously out trying to extradite Sean McGovern. So, while the focus hasn't moved off the Kinahan cartel, this gang, the family, now is their new target. But look, let's make no mistake about it. Even though, as I said, Liam Byrne is getting out in a year's time, this is still a significant day. They have managed to put away people at the absolute top of the Kinahan cartel, and that is to be commended. Not just our Gardaí, but the National Crime Agency, for the incredible work that they did.
Okay, so that was a busy day. Shall we leave it there?
I think we'll leave it there. You've wrapped me up just before I started rambling too much. Thanks, Mick.
That's my job. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back
Thanks
soon.
to everyone for listening.